resident survey results as well. So, yeah, I'm going to take it as read, but certainly available for questions around that document.
So we have read it, we've received, we have read, scribbled lots of questions. Does anyone
or feedback or anything like that?
So comprehensive. You've got none. There we go. That's a great start, isn't it?
Yeah.
Read through my notes. Thank you, Bill.
I'm on page 145. That's the verbatim summary in terms of the survey and comments. And under governance, it talks about more engagement and consultation with the public, and then more transparency and accountability. Is there anything below that? Because they are very generic statements. Any sense of the particular issues giving rise to that commentary?
Really, that's really all that they've mentioned at this stage. Yeah, really just around that engagement, more consultation. Some of this was carried out during the LTP consultation as well. And so certainly wave 2 ran in line with when that occurred. So not sure whether that's got anything to do. Well, obviously that was engagement, but
I suppose
if you're keen to delve, we can. This is a summary of the verbatim feedback. We can actually dig that out of a spreadsheet, which is the size of Africa, and find that information for you.
It's probably more in terms of then the usefulness of the survey and then what happens. There's commentary like that, what happens next in terms of the information. So I don't need all of that, thanks, Jeremy. But it was just highlighting the point of what the process looks like.
Well, mate, good. Shad and Stephen, I do see you online. So Shad first and then you, Stephen, please.
Thank you. Just following in line, I suppose, with the resident survey. I did find it interesting reading through, particularly around the engagement and the amount of engagement that we have done, and that hasn't necessarily translated into, I wouldn't say positive feedback, but feedback that actually we're trying to do as much as we can to connect with the community. And I know we're, a whole range of channels. And I think from a commission perspective, even fronting some of those conversations like the LTP and others, it was kind of disappointing reading that actually that hasn't translated into community feeling that they are being engaged. And I don't know what more we can do, to be fair. So it was just a comment I wanted to make.
Thanks, Shad. Stephen?
Yeah, I echo Shad's comments, and it is disappointing to see those numbers down, particularly given the extra effort that we had put into reaching out to the community with presentations right across the city on our kind of longer term thinking, as well as the consultation process for the LTP. But I think we may have been impacted by a lot of events that were happening at the time of this survey. So Cameron Road was still a state of completion, and obviously the city was concerned about the impact of that whole roading project had both taken a long time and raised traffic, and traffic consistently came up through the survey as a key issue that obviously has understandably aggravated opinion. And I think we're a bit of a victim of that. And of course, we were talking about parking at around the same sort of time. And I don't think there's a topic that's any more emotive than parking in Tauranga. And the survey was on around the time when some initial work was being done on mount parking as well. So I think the combination of those events would have set the sentiment or the mood of the survey. I'd be particularly interested in seeing the first quarter or the first half of this year because I do note quite a significant change in sentiment across the city. We're no longer talking about a dead city centre. Even the Downtown Business Association were much more optimistic and positive this morning. And I note that the media sentiment survey has also been actually at a record high. So from that point of view, hopefully the community will be seeing things coming to fruition and things happening, and that will change the mood a bit. I'd like to really commend the new reporting format on the outcomes. I think that that's a very positive development. It's no longer so much detail as it was previously. And although there are 81 KPIs, it actually doesn't seem a lot when you look through them individually and you're focused on the performance to the outcomes. Some of the numbers, and particularly in transportation, are less positive than we would hope. But once again, that's an impact of all of the roadworks across the city. And one would expect that to improve over time. So I think given the circumstances, it's a useful pulse check. And clearly it's something that we want to monitor in the end of our term. And I think this sets up the council going into the new council with a good reporting framework, which when we combine with the wider monitoring system that is under development across the organisation, will place the new governing body in a good position to be able to monitor progress both against the outcomes and the performance of the organisation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Stephen. Look, I talk all the comments made earlier by the committee members. For me personally, and I try to refrain from drilling down on specific things, but please, can I ask just on page 150, and I think that's on my online version, but also the hard copy, 150, you've got there an inclusive city, and it's just that venues and events. That sort of stuck out to me for some reason. I've written notes there. Could you explain that a little bit, please?
Quick look at that one. Let's have a look.
So it's what you're saying is that there's
It's
two measures, and they're both off track at the moment.
Yep.
If you flick over to page 152, the off track measures there are listed, and the two under venues and events are the first two.
I can see that. Okay. Rightio. So yeah, it is what it is. I can see the comments there. Okay. Thank you. Bill?
Thanks, Chair. I had a question regarding the land information memoranda in terms of the timeframes and the dive in terms of meeting those timeframes. I raised it with Sarah at lunchtime, and she's looking into that at the moment. So she will come back to the committee in terms of the reasoning for that fall off in performance.
Okay.
Thank you. Any further discussion, questions? Rohario?
Kia ora. My question's really around the engagement and really around, because if we listen to what Stephen was talking about, it kind of turns out to be a timing issue, right? You go out to do a survey at a time when there's heaps of roadworks going on, you might get a ton of negative feedback. So it's really around the process of engagement and whether, you ask participants, is there a way that you would like us to engage with you? Or, how were you previously engaged with compared to now? And then that might give them a bit of a kind of something to compare to rather than just moaning about everything that's going wrong. But then again, it might be a true reflection that they don't feel like it's been good enough engagement, but it's about saying, well, what is good engagement to you? And I think, I think I'll just, yeah, leave it there if you've got any initial comments on that.
There's probably two elements in that. One is around the survey itself, and to try and avoid that impact of one big thing on the survey. That's why we do the 4 waves. So we do a wave early in the financial year, one before Christmas, one after Christmas, and one later in the financial year. Each of those waves takes around about 4 weeks to do. So effectively, you've got about 16 weeks of the year of the 52 where we're asking people questions. So the impact of any individual significant something happening in the city is minimised. The wider comments about engaging with people broadly as a council in the way that they are best suited to be engaged with, we'll take that back through the comms team. Absolutely fair value.
And just one further point, the people who do voluntarily engage, so they write and say they want to come in and meet with the commissioners or they ring up the info line. Is there any follow-up after that going, hi, you've recently been in touch with the council, just want to check if you have any comments or, was your question answered, and whether that feedback gets collected?
A number of activities have a what's the phone back system, where it's if you get a 1 to 2 to 3 out of 10, then it's a poor result, and an 8, 9, 10. It's not customer satisfaction, but it's like that. There's a word for it, which Libby might be able to tell me. What's the word? Never mind. So yes, we do. The other aspect is that the Korero Mai system, where if people are prepared to go on to a regular mailing list of other things that we engage on, we invite them into that world, and then they stay within that world until they press the unsubscribe button. So we keep engaging with them on future things.
Kapai, thank you, because I was just thinking about the additional meeting that we had around the alcohol policy and the number of groups that we listened to there, and whether they felt that, that process was helpful for them. I think verbally they had mentioned it during the meeting, but whether that data was also collected or followed up on afterwards.
Very much so, and staff members in that meeting collating that information, and while the report you saw on the LAP was very similar, it's largely because most of the issues raised in those meetings have been raised in the last couple of years anyway, but very much so it's all part of the engagement process.
Thank you. Can I ask one last question, then we'll put it. So thank you very much. You directed me to page 152, read that, and it's probably a question in terms of context. I am interested. I'm sure everyone does know, because disclosure and potential conflicts of interest. I am on the board of Bay Venues, so in that space of events and and venues. So this was a new measure to set a baseline. How did that, obviously new, what made it become a measure? Did something happen, someone raised, can you explain what happened?
So every time we go through the long-term plan process, we go back out to each of the activities, and paraphrasing, you basically ask them, is the information useful and do you use it? Or is it interesting and do you use it? And if not either of those two, how can we gather better information from the community which is more useful to the activity? And then you start to rework and rephrase and repurpose these sort of questions. So from the conversations we'd have had at the time, what we had before wasn't working particularly well. So you then create something new with the activity, Bay Venues in this case. The fact that they're off target is probably because the guesstimate of what the baseline would be was a fraction high. We guessed at 75% as a decent target, and they're coming through in 40s and 50s at the moment. Maybe we just guessed at a fraction high.
Thank you. That's what I was actually hoping to hear. That's it. So it's just a reality check, but I wanted to hear it because that's it. We often do that, don't we? So that's great. Thank you for the clarification. No further questions from me. Anyone else? Shad.
Sorry, just one further query. In terms of the resident survey, so the types of questions, I assume they're standard questions that we ask every pulse check that we go out, or every wave. Same questions, standardised, so we can compare quarter to quarter, year to year, so we can kind of see where we're tracking or not. In terms of other local authorities, do they develop their own, or is there some standard assessment question process?
A standard nationwide system. So each council does their own. Having said that, I think if I lined up 15 along here, you'd recognise questions in most of them. We use the resident satisfaction surveys across the country for the same sort of things. And it's generally, how are the services being received by the community? We can do oodles and oodles of what we're providing, X meters of this, square kilometres of that, blah, blah, blah. But the question that the governance group needs to understand everywhere is, how's that being received? So we all end up with questions which are saying, are you satisfied with the state of the roads? Are you satisfied with the state of the libraries? Are you satisfied with the state of the parks? So there's no formal smorgasbord to pick from, but they'll all be pretty similar.
And then I suppose the approach that we, so it's a randomised survey going out to a selection to get that feedback every wave. And the approach we use, so it is from what I understand, via mail, and then logging into the system and then putting in your results or feedback.
Requesting a hard copy if you so desire. So we send out the letter. The market research company sends out the letter, invites you to go to the online portal, and then you can fill in the form. But it also says, if you're not an online portal sort of person and you want a hard copy, here it is. I'm going to send it out to you with an envelope. All you've got to provide is the pen and the opinions, and send it back, and we'll log it ourselves.
And then from a demographic perspective, also scales to rationalise, I suppose, so we're not getting all over 65s or under 35s, getting a broad representation across the demographic groups.
They start from the electoral list and they try that, and then when the results come back, they will weight it. I mean, if, for instance, you sent out a perfectly demographic bunch and only the young people responded this time around, they would weight that and then make sure that over the 4 waves, we've got the right weighting across the city.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Thank you. We've got a mover. Someone second. Bill, second, please. Okay. So this is we are receiving, please. Receiving the report. So all those in favour, please say aye. Those against, that is carried. Thank you very much. Thank you. Righty-ho. Let's move on to item 9.5, please, which is growth and land use projects progress report for up to March 2024. Good.
Good afternoon. It's a very small committee today. Everyone online. I'll just take the report as read, including the attachment. No doubt there'll be some questions, but I'll just make a couple of very brief comments on a couple of the items that are covered. Just firstly, in terms of some of the milestones, so over the last 3 months, we've achieved some really good milestones in terms of some of the greenfield projects. So getting a number of plan changes notified, particularly for Tauranga West and for the Tauranga business estate. And with Tauranga West also having the enabling works contract now in place and construction underway for those projects to enable development to commence. I'll just bring your attention as well to the update of the smart growth strategy, including the future development strategy, which is the 30-year blueprint for growth across the sub-region. So good progress has been made there. Deliberations are now, I'm going to say complete, or are there 1 or 2 completed? And there's just some further reporting work through SLG and to partner councils to get the strategy endorsed. The government is doing a lot of work around resource management reform. The first of those bills has been introduced to Parliament around fast-track consenting, which provides, no doubt, some opportunities for some projects in Tauranga. urban development and infrastructure projects that would be led by the private sector, government agencies, including large roading projects, and also potentially projects that the council delivers itself. So we're just assessing that bill and the submission that we might make on that at the moment. And we're expecting a number of other bills later this year on the Resource Management Act. And then heading into next year, replacement legislation for the RMA itself. There is a substantial redraft of the government policy statement for land transport that has been released, which has significantly changed in focus towards, I guess, economic development and efficiency, and particularly state highway projects with a lesser focus on projects like public transport, walking and cycling. So again, a significant work is going on internally about the implications of that and the submission that we will make as Tauranga City Council. And just lastly, the final points, and this is a request from a recent council meeting. So starting at page 20, paragraph 26 in the report is some information that was requested, I think from you, Stephen, around greenfield development capacity, and particularly having that allocated between, in particular, housing or development that has been consented and development capacity that remains unconsented and would be developed in the future. So I guess the key takeaways from that, there's around about 900 vacant sections in our existing greenfield areas at the moment. On top of that, there are about 2,350 consented additional sections that are either in construction, so aren't yet titled, or they've been consented but construction hasn't commenced. And then beyond that, there's another 3,600 homes that we have estimated can be delivered in areas that have yet to receive resource consent. So that provides around 6,000 homes towards the 30,000 homes that we need to deliver over the next 30 years. So happy to take questions.
Thank you. I'm just pausing. I had questions. Stephen, I see your hand up. I think quite right. A lot of the stuff was generated from questions in the previous meetings. But just before I do, so thank you very much. Paragraph 27, you've produced that table. You've just sort of summarised the things that I can see from the table, the numbers, and I think the question I was hoping to ask was, because I try to apply my own brain power as to what themes and what's it telling us and what can we derive from it, and I came up with 0. I was struggling. Is there a high level what you're seeing with these numbers and
I think there's
what it's telling us?
Probably a couple of takeaways. One thing is that definitely running out of development capacity, and that without rezoning new areas like Tauranga West, you're going to fast run out of any new development capacity in greenfield areas. Obviously, there's intensification and infill development on top of this, so that's a key takeaway. I think the second one is that if you look at Tauranga, which might be different to some other cities, generally developers and landowners are active. So development, a lot of it's happened or is happening. Not a lot of land is being held back or land banked for future development. So that's the kind of what's in the 3,600 column. But a lot of that will be part of some very, very big developments that are staged and delivered over time. And some of those stages won't have resource consent. So that just, I guess, reflects the nature that you don't release a 1,000 or 500 unit subdivision all in 1 year.
That's the high level themes I thought you'd say. Thank you very much for that. Stephen, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. And I think really fitted to your question, Wayne, it does underline how thin we are. That 878 vacant sections is about a year's supply. If we should be building in Tauranga about 1,000 a year. And so just having 900 up your sleeve is about a year's supply. So that's pretty slim. On the positive side, having another 2.5 or 2,300 consented and possibly another 3,600 in the pipeline is reassuring. My question is, Andy, what's the anticipated timeline for that 6,000? I mean, are we talking 6,000 over 5 years, 10 years? 6,000 over 5 years is probably okay, but 6,000 over 10 years to get some of the longer run ones included would start to get us very thin.
Certainly, I think the bulk of it will be within 5 or 10 years, which is a bit longer than what I think you're hoping there. But there's certainly in that assumed column, there are some sites that are a little bit more tricky or will take a lot longer than that. So in that assumed column, for example, we have a lot of development capacity on multiple owned Maori land, particularly in Bethlehem and Welcome Bay. Also some in Papamoa. We have sites like Potorifi, so I think that's probably got an allocation of about 300 in that assumed column that potentially could take a decent amount of time. There are also a few sites in there that have infrastructure constraints, so they might be zoned residential, but for some reason there's a substantive kind of infrastructure issue that may not be addressed through our LTP. So there will be a long tail on that 3,600, and I mean, we could do some more work around that timing issue, but yeah, I'd say a good chunk of that, possibly, like if I was to estimate, maybe half of that assumed column could be in that sort of 10-year plus type category.
Yeah, so that really does underline the risks that we run. So given that scenario, Andy, it would signal that we might do 3,000 in 5 years, which is well short of the 1,000 a year. So that's the challenge in front of us, Wayne.
Good, Steve. Yeah, I totally agree. We've got a question from Shad. Can I just sneak one in, Shad? Very quick. So I did highlight the not consented. You said there that some of the land in the undeveloped has been included, that multi-owned land, Māori land. So again, I'm sure it is, but I want to ask the question again. Trying to work and do as much as we can to work with hapu iwi whānau to open up those land holdings to building and relieve some of this shortage. Is resourcing wise, do you go as far as working with the Māori Land Court to see what they can do to try and expedite the process, because it can be quite challenging?
So we're certainly working closely with Maori Land Trust to, I guess, identify what the barriers are and which of those relate back to council. So whether it's a zoning issue, maybe a development contribution issue, or what have you. We are, of course, working with the TK14 Trust in terms of their upcoming Maori Land Court processes, and that's in Tutumu. Obviously not part of this table, but part of future development. I guess, we do want to try and enable that development capacity and to enable it sooner than what's happened in the past, like our historic experience, which is your historic experience, is that housing development's been very slow. We need to speed that up on Maori land, and as part of definitely part of our city deal discussions with the government, and Christine might have some further comments perhaps.
So TPO's on the meeting. So TPO in its smart growth role is heavily involved with this as well, and it certainly is part of the city deal conversations about putting forward identification of some of the barriers and how the Crown can help us address those through the city deal process.
Okay, Jules. And we noticed, Bruce, you're back online. Thank you.
Sorry, I just wanted to make some comments as well. I know I found the table really helpful, just to see what current capacity is available and also assumed. And in bearing in mind, like further on in your tables, what we're currently working on, Tauranga West, to Tumu, there's a whole lot of things in train, all the plan changes up in Ohawati. There's a whole lot of things that we're trying to release, even some of the intensification, plan change 33. We had the conversation about the Mount Spatial Plan as well. So there's a whole lot of things we are doing to try and unlock things quicker to provide for that long-term capacity. And scrolling through the attachment table at the end of the report, I found that helpful as well. One of the things I thought, and it might be another iteration to this table, is actually having a table with some, listing all those projects, the capacity we're looking at, and then the timeframes, because they're all in kind of different, the sequencing's all different, and what we assume in terms of development capacity for each of those projects, I think would be quite helpful as well, just so that we can kind of see what we currently got, and then hopefully what's in train.
So we effectively have that. So through our housing and business assessment, initially, we looked at what supply we did have, and that's allocated between the short term, 3 years, the medium term, and the long term in Tauranga. So that's existing greenfield areas, future greenfield areas, and intensification, and the same across Western Bay. And then through the future development strategy and the smart growth review, we've added to that further by saying, look, we've got this much shortfall of housing, where is it going to go? And so new areas have been identified. So certainly actually provided Christine with the updated table today. It's still a working draft, but we can and we will provide that through to you.
I think just to report on it, to be able to report on where we currently are, I think would be helpful.
Chair, just picking up on that, I agree. So what we've got mapped out in front of us is kind of the likely supply of greenfields. I don't know how easy it would be to do a similar exercise for brownfields. Add the two together, which would then give you a forecast supply of houses or homes coming online based on what we know today, and then compare that against 1,000. You would then have a kind of a clear picture, and I'm thinking a graph, which shows the anticipated supply, both greenfields and brownfields, as compared against the need. That would be very helpful.
So if I could just answer that. So Stephen, thank you for that question. We do have that information already, and we can provide that to you through Plan Change 33. Went through quite a extensive exercise of working through development capacity for infill and intensification. And obviously plan-enabled numbers need to be whittled down because of feasibility and infrastructure constraints and realisation. Not everything that's feasible will be delivered. So we have done that, and we can supply that through. Just the other quick point I would make is that obviously the real basic mass of 30,000 homes over 30 years is 1,000 per annum. But the growth rate that we have at the moment is very much front-loaded. So we need to be delivering more than 1,000 houses in, say, the first 5 or 10 years, and it decreases at the back end of the 30 years based on the demographic forecast for New Zealand, which we all know could change, particularly with a lot of migration at the moment. But Stephen, I think we could easily be talking about 1,200 homes or something in that order for the first wee while. So it puts us even further behind.
Okay, thank you. Stephen, if you've had, Bill, you had your hand up.
Thanks, Chair. Different topic. Plan Change 38. So we're getting the scope of that in May. I just wanted a sense, Andy, in terms of the indicative time frame in terms of being in the position to actually notify that, and particularly that my interest in terms of that commercial/business hierarchy as part of that plan change.
So it's a big plan change, probably bigger than Plan Change 33. There's going to be a lot of work this year on doing, I guess, the background investigations and really identifying all the issues and options, which moves into next year in terms of plan drafting. So I think from memory, and I could be wrong, and we'll of course bring you the up-to-date timeframes when we report through May. It was not until sort of the back end of the next calendar year, so that's 2025, that we would be looking at notification. Yeah, it's roughly in that order. Yeah,
I suppose it's, and that's how it is. So in terms of the time frame, but that work, in my view, is quite critical. So it's really ensuring there's that broad partnership support for that through our smart growth partners in terms of that work progressing and not disappearing into the ether.
Comments. One is that the existing council will sign off and endorse that project plan, which means that we will get on with that straight away. So that will be well underway by the time the new council comes in. And it's certainly something that can be incorporated and reflected in the smart growth implementation plan. I think from memory it is sitting in there. And so that will come through as part of the smart growth package that gets signed off at the SLG partnership level.
We're on the same wavelength. That's great. and just while we're on the smart growth strategy, so that's going to the leadership group on the 23rd of April for endorsement, and then off to the individual partners for sign off. And I'd just like to make the comment too that the FDS has that 30-year time frame. The overall smart growth strategy goes out 50 years. So I raise that because there is some debate in terms of figures and information, but it's really just keeping in mind that the smart growth one has a much longer time frame, which is also helpful in some of the thinking and work that's been undertaken.
Thank you, Bill. Any further questions or comments? Okay. Thank you. Can I have someone move that we receive that report? We've got Shad to move and Bill to second. Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, that is carried. Thank you very much. We are now on to item 9.6, which is Urban Design Panel, the Terms of Reference update, please. Carl again, thank you.
Good to be back. This is it's a relatively short paper. Take the paper as read, relating to the terms of reference for our urban design panel. Now, the terms of reference are refinements, so it has been through the committee previously when the panel was set up. And just over the last, I guess, 18 months, as we've been working with that panel, we've looked at ways of refining, and you'll recall that we brought a report to you in the last quarter of last year, which talked about some of the lessons learned. So this really reflects those, and it's summarised in paragraph 4, and I'll just paraphrase it, but the terms of reference look to provide less stringent direction on the size type of proposals coming before the panel. I guess when we started, we thought that was kind of important, large, significant, but actually it's important to all of our applications coming through, and that we encourage as many people to come through as we can. Transportation has been added as a core discipline, which is coming up in a lot of our projects, particularly council ones. Nomination through professional bodies, but also the ability to nominate panellists based on their work with council and expertise and experience that's been demonstrated. D, which is an important one for discussion, that the final appointment of panel members can be undertaken via council resolution or through delegation of council's chief executive. I think that's just acknowledging that from time to time there will be small changes that will require. Someone might drop out due to changing employers or profession, and this gives us the ability to manage that, and then some other minor updates around timeframes and so forth. So yeah, happy to take any questions.
Bill?
Thanks, Chair. Support the proposition and just acknowledging the work of the team, both in terms of our staff and the panel to date. I had 3 questions, Carl. In terms of the operation of the panel and proposals being considered by the panel, Once that feedback has been received as a result of engaging with the panel, is that flowing through to, say, a more timely or efficient consenting process? So that's the first.
I think the short answer is yes, just acknowledging that often an application has many matters that are being dealt with, so beyond urban design. So this only deals with those matters, but it is very much the purpose of the process, and bringing people to the table is to provide that, I guess, clearer pathway, by working with the panel. So there's only a number of consents that are currently at that stage that we've taken through, but it is proving, I guess, useful and advantageous in that regard.
Thank you. Second one, I couldn't. I'll give you some context. Some time ago, when we were establishing the public art panel, we were keen to make sure that that panel and the urban design panel were connected up. I couldn't see that reflected anywhere. I may have missed it. I just wanted to ensure that that happens, because in the relevance of that is that there is that bringing together of public and private developments, and sometimes that public art panel consideration and proposals may be an integral part of the urban design consideration. So I just wanted to check whether that is in the thinking and is being considered in terms of that working together as appropriate.
So I do recall this discussion coming up in the past. I don't think, the terms of reference don't specifically respond to that. So it is an amendment that we could make to ensure that where there is a matter relating to arts, we could consider, I guess, discussion with that other panel, and also whether there might need to be, for lack of a better word, cross-pollination between the two as experts, which the terms of reference generally allow us to bring on experts where necessary.
Can I suggest that, Chair, that there is that specific reference in the terms of reference? And as you say, Carl, it does work both ways also, in terms of relevant proposals and initiatives. So that would be great. And my third, I think it's my third one. Yes, so I'm on page 200, where there are the triggers for panel review. I don't have any issue with the 5 triggers that are bullet pointed, but I'm just wondering whether the addition of public realm can fit in there somewhere, because I think that's potentially a bit of a gap given what we're doing over the city.
Be happy to add that. It makes
Okay.
good sense.
Oh, I've got one more, sorry. And that's on step 3, draft information requirements, and it talks about context analysis. I'm just wondering whether, in references mana whenua engagement and cultural considerations, no issue with that, but where heritage considerations would fit into that process. And I know Shad has raised that in another context previously. But I'm quite happy to move the report for those amendments of the terms of reference, Chair.
Bill, any further comments, and is there a seconder?
I've got questions. Kilda, so it's just leading on from what Bill was talking about in terms of mana whenua, and I was just trying to see in here, so under the point around mana whenua, Te Rangapu can nominate Māori design professionals, but will there be, for each panel set up, will there be a mana whenua or a Māori design expert appointed to each of the panels?
So probably 2 parts to the answer. One is, so as part of the overall panelists. We do have kaupapa Māori design experts on the panel. So by the end of today, because we've got another item on panel members, there will be 4 with specific expertise in that area. So each time we have a panel or an application or a proposal come before us, we will look at what that application looks like and choose a suitable panelist for it. So certainly if there was any aspect that we thought made sense to include those panelists on it, we would certainly, and that would often be the case. I think the other part of that question is also more generally is the way we work on our projects, and that's where projects themselves, as and when appropriate, need to be engaging directly with hapu and mana whenua, and also incorporating their own or bringing into the fore design expertise as required. So that doesn't take away from what the projects themselves need to do, and that's the expectation. And then the panel is, I guess, sort of testing whether they've done that and whether they might have covered all the relevant issues.
Okay, well, so my question really is around, who makes that decision on whether a Māori design expert is needed, and whether, because sometimes if you don't know, then you may not know, you may not realise that a Māori design expert is needed unless there is one already in the room.
Yeah, look, that's a fair comment. So I think if it wasn't obvious to us, we would seek input from Tipo Takawāinga in terms of what that application, was looking like and whether they thought. And I think if we couldn't get the advice there, we may seek, to further touching base with Te Rangapu. But I think generally, yeah, we would ensure that if we were uncertain, we would go to the next steps to get advice on that.
Yeah, it still doesn't quite fully answer it, because if you have to know that you're uncertain before taking that next step. So, it's just that it didn't come across to me as clearly in this policy. So, this terms of reference. I'll move on to my next question, and that is around additional experts. There's a lot of examples in there: transport, stormwater, heritage. We don't have any tangata whenua expertise highlighted in that list. Is it possible to include, or has it been purposely excluded? And I'm only raising this because of the knowledge and history that a tangata whenua representative or expert may bring that a Māori design specialist who may not whakapapa to here may not have. So that's where that question's coming from.
Yes, and we have talked and put thought around this. And I think the role of the Māori design expert is somewhat within that review to make a call and make sure that the project is getting the appropriate input from tangata whenua. So it's not necessarily to give that view, that tangata whenua view through that design process, but to be able to look at the design process that's been undertaken and say, is it appropriate that that input is there? Has it taken place? And if it's not, there would be a strong direction to go and talk with tangata whenua reps between the project team and the tangata, and then them to input and come back to us, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I'm happy with that. I'm definitely not advocating that the Māori design expert, it must also be tangata whenua, but it's just around additional experts, whether a tangata whenua kind of knowledge system would be classified as an additional expert area that may assist with this group.
I think based on both the comments and questions you've had, I think we could build in some words into the terms of reference, I guess, to acknowledge both the importance of determining the right experts on each panel to include consideration of tangata whenua values, and then also to the point just now that input may be required on those projects, and that's part of the overall kōrero and within this context. We could put some words together. I think it's similar. We've got the, I guess, delegation to make updates to this and come back with some proposed words.
Kia ora. Rohario, I'll pass on to Pio, I see his hand up, but I just want to see what Rohario have said. I know it sounds, when you say that, you're thinking, how can you sometimes not know? But the truth is we don't know what we don't know. We don't, and it's hard. There's numerous examples of when we've called in design input far too late. And it's not to anyone's benefit to do that. So sometimes we're not aware when we should have that presence. So again, a very important raise from a practical point of view. And yeah, if we can all work together to make sure it sort of is triggered early and picked up on, but a very important point.
I can provide a little bit more context. It relates to this. So we're currently working on the Urban Design Action and Investment Plan. As part of that, we are working with Maori design experts to develop, I guess, the content for that, and part of that is around how we engage with tangata whenua through design projects specifically. So where we're at in that process is we've developed with input from those design experts, a number of principles for that, and we're taking them to Tauranga this week to seek input. So that is about going some way, about how we need to engage, and that engagement is expected across our projects generally. So it's good to hear these questions because I can think about it from that perspective as well.
Right, thank you. Kia ora. Te Pio? No, I don't know if you're talking. It's frozen a little bit. You might be on mute, mate. Can you have a look?
Yes, technology limitations at home. But yes, no, I was first saying, thanking Cole for the report, but I was just saying that I was on a similar track of thinking in terms of Rohario, so thanks for raising that. I suppose just to add to the discussion, I do think and it was really supportive of those triggers, and so the inclusion of heritage along there is important. I think one of the and I support those the lists that you've got in terms of the selection of panelists and those skills and attributes that they would bring to the panel to support the kaupapa that the panel is looking to investigate. I really just want to raise the issue that the important thing for me, for me and for council is just that the panel is looking for innovation in design, in the use of materials, the innovation in terms of sustainability, energy use, the issues around having zero impact on water discharge to the moana. I think are key innovations that we're looking for in the design of these projects, buildings, some key features. I think that would be intergenerational for our city and for the landscape as well. So I'm really just highlighting the use of innovation and design, materials, and those types of kaupapa for you, Cole. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Te Pio. Great discussion. Any further comments or questions? No? If that's the case, now I do remember, I think Bill moved. Do we have a seconder, please? Shad, thank you. We do have a seconder. Now, I think there's 5 parts to that, the recommendation. So as long as we're all happy with that and clear, can I please, all those in favour, say aye? Aye. Those against? That's carried. Thank you very much. Well, that, I think, brings us to the end of public included. So we now need someone, please, to move and a seconder so that we can move into excluded, please. So Rohario to move, to go into excluded, Bill to second. Thank you very much. All those in favour say aye. Those against, that's carried. We shall now move into public excluded, please.